A Guten Erev Shabbos. The main theme of our portion this week is really the main theme of Jewish life. We pray that our children seek appropriate partners to build a Jewish family. We help wherever we can, and we celebrate the marriage of the next generation and pray for good things as they continue the generations. That's what we hope for, that's what we work for, and that's what gives us the greatest nachas. Not everyone has the blessing of children, but we all have a stake in the future of the Jewish people. About that, there's no question. The shidduch, the finding of a proper life partner for Yitzchak, for Isaac, occupies the majority of our portion of Chayei Sarah this week. And yet there's one detail that's part of the narrative that's not directly connected to marriage, but rather to another part of the life cycle, namely its end. That really piques our interest at this moment in history. We're talking about the tremendous efforts and expense that Abraham goes to procure a burial place for his wife Sarah after she dies. In a nutshell, he tries to purchase a field from the locals, the Bnei Ches, the Hittites, and they make negotiation very complicated. At the end, he succeeds in obtaining the land and is able to bury his wife Sarah there. This purchase of land for cash leads the Midrash Hagadol to identify this spot, the cave of Machpelah in Hebron, as one of the three places where the nations of the world cannot dispute Jewish ownership of the land in Israel. Not that that plan is going over too well, but so says the Midrash. The other two, by the way, are the Temple Mount purchased by King David, and Yaakov and Shechem coming up in a few weeks in Parshas Vayishlach. However, really from last week's Parsha, where God promises Avraham that his descendants will inherit the land through the very end of the Torah, which we just finished on Simchas Torah a few weeks ago, it's all about the journey toward the land of Israel and the promise of the land of Israel. For those of us who read the book, or at least saw the movie, there's not a shred of doubt that Israel, the land of Israel, is the Jewish home, our homeland, and that this has been our hope, our dream, our vision, if not always our reality, for the past 3,000 years. The problem, of course, is that when you show your holy book to others who don't believe in it or think maybe it's a little bit out of date, or think maybe there's a better sacred scripture out there, it's hard to bring a proof from our text that will convince them. I heard a nice Dvar Torah from Israel recently, given by my nephew Gavi, that explained that really the message is for us. It's to deepen and anchor and strengthen our own understanding of why we're in the land, and our resolve, and how profoundly rooted is our claim to the land and its claim on us. At this moment in history, it becomes clearer to us, if it wasn't already, that the very existence of Jews in the land of Israel is intolerable to many people. And those people seem to have a lot of support around the world, particularly with those who don't think about things too carefully. With our troubling times in mind, let's use this little story of Avraham and the Hittites to see how much of what goes on in our world is really the same old thing, rehashed in current language, but nothing new under the sun. A famous Israeli professor called Yehuda Elitzur, who passed away about 25 years ago, explains the drama behind the scenes of what's going on with this land transaction, this deal at the beginning of Parshas Chayei Sarah. On the surface, the conversation between Avraham and Ephron is a polite transaction between two friends. Ephron uses the almost obsequious phrase, my Lord, hear me. And Avram humbles himself by bowing before the Hittites. He lowers himself and he says, I am a resident alien among you. While the Hittites glorify him, they say, you're a prince of God among us. What is it that what's the dispute? What are they even arguing about? Avram wants to pay for a burial plot, and Ephron and the Hittites refuse to accept his money. They insist that he take a burial plot as a gift. Each party is over the top courteous and solicitous of each other. But if we listen really closely to the language of this exchange, we'll find that what we perceive as a polite conversation is actually a trademark of the shuk, where sellers and buyers use friendly language, respectful language, to mask cutthroat bargaining tactics. So then what is actually going on behind the scenes in the story of Avram and Ephron? In all ancient societies, Professor Elitzur explains, the sale of land to foreigners was a serious taboo. Avram has already been living in the land for many years, but he's not been able to acquire any for himself, for his family, for his descendants. God had promised him the land as an eternal inheritance, but somehow, even with his great wealth and his shining reputation among the Canaanites, he was still basically a stranger in the land. Not an inch of it belonged to him. No one would sell him a speck of land to call his own. The Canaanites respected Avraham, probably even admired this new monotheism he was preaching. We read in Parshas Lech Lecha that some of the locals even shared his views. They clearly held Avram in great esteem, even in the case of the Hittites, going so far as to call him a prince of God among us. But despite this respectful relationship, the people of Canaan would not, under any circumstances, allow him to own land in his own right. So now, when Sarah dies, Avram decides to leverage the moment, to start to realize God's promise of, I assign the land that you dwell in to you and your offspring to come, all the land of Canaan, as an achuzas olam, an everlasting possession. That's what God said to him before. So Avram takes his first real shot at purchasing land from the Canaanim, from the Canaanites. So he comes to bury his wife. He turns to the crowd at the funeral and he says, I'm a resident alien among you. This is not humility. He's pointing out his frustration of his current situation. I've been living here for decades, but I'm still a foreigner. He says, give me a burial site among you, that I may remove my dead for burial. In other words, Avram's announcing to everybody there he's not going to go ahead with the burial until they sell him a burial space, a burial site that he owns as an inheritance. Maybe that the locals are taken aback a little bit by this request. This venerable old guy that they know as a dreamy idealist is now exploiting the fact of his wife's death in order to acquire property. But Avram knows the truth. It's not just a plot of land, it's his whole life's purpose. He remembers how God told him, go forth to the land that I'll show you, to your generations, your offspring, I'm giving this land. This is where Avram summons the chutzpah to push the deal forward. The negotiation process then becomes a back and forth, sharp battle of wits. The Hittites present their first offer. They're prepared to give Avram permission to bury Sarah in their cave. They say, you're the elected prince of God among us. Bury your dead in the choicest of our burial places. None of us would withhold his burial place from you for burying your dead, but Avram's not interested in this kind of a deal. He bows to the Hittites and he lets them know exactly what he wants. He says, you must agree to intercede with me, with Ephron, son of Tzochar. Let him give me the cave of Machpelah that he owns, which is at the edge of his land. Let him give it to me at the full price for a burial site in your midst. The very public nature of this exchange just highlights the drama of the moment in this reading. The crowd is on the edge of their seats. They're watching Avram and Ephron, waiting for each one to make his next move. At this stage, Avram is requesting the right to purchase the cave, a plain old burial plot. In response, Ephron acts as if he doesn't understand the question, repeating the same grandiose, magnanimous language from the first offer that the Bnei Chetz, the Hittites, made. Permission to bury Sarah in the cave, which would continue to be owned by Ephron. The language is very repetitive here, very interesting, as our Balkara noted this week. Ephron recognizes that Avram uses the word natan, to give, as in, give me a burial site. Let him give me the cave of Machpelah. Let him give it to me at full price. Because of this, Ephron mirrors his language, Avram's language. He says, I give you the field, and I give you the cave that's in it. I give it to you in the presence of all my people. But in Ephron's usage, giving refers not to the sale of property, but to the giving permission. He's bending Avram's phrasing to his own agenda. This explains Ephron's sudden addition of the field into the language of the transaction. He's not offering the field for sale, but only giving Avraham permission to use his cave, which happens to be located in that field. In response to Ephron's persistent refusal to sell him land, Avraham bows once more and again makes his point to address Ephron in front of everybody. Before the people of the land, he ratchets it up to a new level. He says, "Let me give the price of the land. Accept it from me." In response, Ephron changes the scope of the land in question. Instead of selling just the cave, as Avram requested, Ephron's now speaking about the whole field surrounding it as well. Ephron sets the price for the transaction astronomically high, masking this unreasonable sum, this ridiculous amount of money, with false courteous pleasantries. "My lord, hear me. A piece of land worth 400 shekels of silver? What's that between you and me?" At this point, Ephron hoped that Avram would back down from the deal, which would have been the smart move from a business perspective. Instead, Avram accepted on the spot. Avram paid out to Ephron the money that he named, that all the Hittites heard, 400 shekels of silver at the going merchant's rate. All kinds of estimates about how much that works out to be in contemporary dollars. All the commentators agree that it's an astronomical sum. Avram is basically buying Hebron real estate at Toronto prices. The deal was done, and on a larger scale than Avram had thought possible, with public witnesses and public acknowledgement. Avram achieved what he needed. He became a legitimate landowner in the Promised Land. Then and only then was he able to take the final step in cementing his ownership of the land, as it says, "And then Avraham buried his wife Sarah in the cave of the field of Machpelah." What's going on with this whole story is that Avraham is being offered, as Jews from Arab lands were offered for millennia, and Jews in Christian Europe for over 1,000 years were offered the gift of living as a second-class citizen. Maybe protected, maybe tolerated, maybe even allowed to bury our dead if the owners of the cemetery are in a good mood that day, but never as a nation in our own right, or even individuals in our own right, or with our own rights. That would come later, during the emancipation in France with the Comte Clermont-Tonnerre. Never a patch of land to call our own, a place of refuge, a homeland where we could be safe. Of course, this offer has profound theological roots in Christendom and political resonance in the Dar al-Islam, the global reach of Islam. In a nutshell, we deserve what we get. The Jews get nothing because the Jews are nothing. You hear pretty strong echoes of this in the media of our moment. Who are the Jews to stand up for themselves? Who are they to defend themselves against attack and carnage and years of harassment and rocket fire and abductions and terror bombings? We keep saying, like any other nation would do if they were attacked, and you see that gets us nowhere, because the rules that apply to every other nation don't apply to us. Avram's efforts to secure for us, his children, a foothold in the land that God promised was the first step in a process that continues to this very day, to this very moment. Avram's deal establishes not only legal ownership, but also psychological ownership, in Rav Aaron Soloveitchik's explanation. We can see that achieving our place as any other nation on earth is not easy. It's not cheap. It's certainly not offered to us on a silver platter. And it's not guaranteed. We stand on guard. Our children, our children's children stand on guard to preserve the people in the land, and even with that, there's no guarantee. Among the valuable insights gleaned from this seemingly small, trivial incident that worked out okay in the end anyway, is to watch very carefully and listen very carefully to the words not only of our adversaries, but also of our friends. Maybe even more carefully to the words of our friends, or those who seem to be the words, to those who seem to be our friends. There's no free lunch. And the land, like the state, and like our Jewish identity and tradition, does not come easily and does not endure in and of itself if we do not hold on tightly to it. Another insight is to know what we want and know what we need, and stay focused on that with intensity and purpose and tenacity, and like Avraham, not to get talked out of it. After a half century of pretty good times since 1967, we are now called to rally in support of our land and our people and ourselves once again. You would think the world would have learned that the Jews are not going away no matter what, but they will figure it out eventually. In the meantime, we will stand together, saying, Am Yisrael Chai, the people of Israel lives. I heartily encourage everyone who's able to join the rally downtown in support of Israel this Sunday, and bring the support of Israel and bringing home the hostages safe and alive. Sunday at 1:30 p.m., and whatever else you have on your calendar, it can wait. A good Shabbos.